This tutorial will walk you through the basics of APA style. It's important to note that some professors might not require all elements of APA style, so it will be important to clarify with each professor what they require for each paper that you turn in to them. So first of all, what is APA? APA is a citation style format created by the American Psychological Association. Currently, APA is in its 7th edition and first printing. It provides a standard format for references and paper setup and format. The purpose of this citation style is to assist in avoiding plagiarism. Now, first of all, regarding the format of your papers. The paper should be in either 12-point Times New Roman, 11-point Calibri, 11-point Arial, 11-point Lucida Sans Unicode, or 11-point George font. This is a change from APA 6 in that now it requires a choice between these font types instead of only Times New Roman. However, again, it's recommended that you check with your professor to see what their preference is. Everything, including the references, should be double-spaced within your paper, and 1-inch margins should be used on all sides of the paper. Use a single space after any body text punctuation. The first page of your APA paper will be the title page. The title page should include all of this information centered about 1/3 of the way down the page. The next page of your paper will be the abstract. The abstract is a summary of the key points in the paper. It should be one paragraph that is between 150 and 250 words. The title abstract should be in upper and lowercase letters centered at the top of the page. The abstract is one of those features that is sometimes used but often not used in student papers. So again, be sure to check with your instructor regarding whether or not they require an abstract. Now moving on to the body of the paper. The first page of your paper will start with the title. The title should be centered, and the first paragraph should start directly below the title without a heading. This first paragraph is the introduction for your paper. The use of headings is encouraged in APA style to distinguish between parts of the paper. This chart shows the headings recommended by APA 7. There are a total of 5 levels. Many of the papers you will be writing will only have the first level and possibly the second. It does depend on how you choose to organize the paper. I highly recommend you look at the sample paper template provided both in the APA LibGuide and linked below to see an example of all of the facets of an APA paper, including the title page, abstract, and these headings. Being able to visualize it is incredibly helpful. Regarding word choice, make certain that every word means exactly what you intend it to mean. Avoid colloquial expressions. Avoid jargon. Jargon are words that are used by a specific setting or field of work. Only use these kinds of technical terms when it is relevant. Also use the more familiar term over a more technical term to assist the reader. Again, the goal is to help your reader understand what you're trying to say. Avoid pronouns unless it's obvious to whom or what the pronoun references, and use the word they or their instead of a gender pronoun like he or she when referring to a generic person whose gender is unknown or irrelevant to the context. Regarding numerals versus words to express numbers, these are some specific guidelines to help you. The most important one to note is that numbers 1 through 9 are always expressed in word format, whereas numbers 10 and above are expressed through numerals. Quotation marks should be used to indicate the exact words of another. So if you're quoting the exact words from a text or other source type, be sure to cite that quote in the quotation marks. Every time you paraphrase or summarize the author, you still need to credit the source in the text, but you don't need to use quotes in those paraphrase instances where you're just summarizing the points of the author. So one of the ways that you can try to avoid plagiarism within your paper is by using a references page. The reference page should be the last page or pages of your paper. The first page of the references should be labeled references. All references should be in alphabetical order, and each reference should have a hanging indent and be double-spaced. The other way you avoid plagiarism within your paper and make note of the specific instances that you use each source is through parenthetical or in-text citations. When you're summarizing or paraphrasing, include the author's last name and the year of publication. Here are some examples of one or more authors and how you would cite them through an in-text citation. When you're quoting, include the author's last name, year of publication, and the page number of the quote. So again, when citing a direct quote, you need to include the page number that you utilize that quote from. If the quote is from a website, then the paragraph number should be listed. And if the document doesn't have page numbers but has multiple sections, then include the section and the paragraph within the section. For example, conclusion, comma, paragraph 1, noting that you drew this quote from the conclusion section and from the first paragraph. Now here is an example of a reference for a book. So a reference for a book would start with the last name, followed by the first two initials, the date in parentheses, the title in italics, and then the publisher. A journal article is similar. However, the title of the article is not in italics, and only the first word of the article should be capitalized. However, the title of the journal comes next, in this case Time, in italics with every word capitalized. Following this is the journal number, italicized, issue number, and specific page numbers of the article. Now here is an example of a website citation. You do include the link afterwards as displayed here. And here are some examples of instances of multiple authors and how you would cite those as a reference. Now if you have more than 20 authors, you list the first 20 authors and then the last author, like so. So in this case you see the first 20 authors listed, ellipses, and then the last author. If the work has two authors, cite both names every time the reference occurs as an in-text citation. But if the work has three authors, you only need to cite all the authors as an in-text citation the first time the reference occurs. Then you only need to include the last name of the first author, followed by et al. After that. When a work has four or more authors, only cite the last name of the first author, followed by et al. I recommend that you utilize the Purdue OWL resource, which is also linked below, for these kinds of specific instances, as I know it can get confusing without seeing it laid out in the differences between different cases. Sometimes when there is not an author, then there is simply a corporate author instead of an individual author. So in this case, the American Psychological Association is the author of the APA manual. So even though that is not an individual, it is an organization, then it becomes the author, so then that whole organization name is listed both in the reference and in-text citation in the author field. When there's no author, then the title of the work becomes the author. So if the work does not have an author, cite the source by its title in the signal phrase or use the word or two in parentheses. Titles of books and reports are italicized and underlined. Titles of articles, chapters, and web pages are in quotation marks. If there is no date for a resource, simply use in.d. in place of the date field. If you do mention the author within the text, you do not need to actually mention them in the parenthetical or in-text citation. So here's an example of that. Smith, James, and Ryan. Then right after that, you would put the date in parentheses, state that education is important. If that is a direct quote, you would need that page number at the end of the sentence, as shown in the second example. So this has been a summary of APA citation style. Please do utilize the LibGuide resource and the Purdue OWL and the APA 7 manual for more specific and detailed information. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the library at library@mnu.edu.